Okay, let's take our reading this morning from Psalm 102, verses 19 through. Yeah, let's take it from 19. For he has looked down from the height of his sanctuary. From heaven did the Lord behold the earth. Gives you where God is in that greatness and transcendence. To hear, verse 20, the groaning of the prisoner. To loose those that are appointed to death. To declare the name of the Lord in Zion and his praise in Jerusalem. When the people are gathered together and the kingdoms to serve the Lord. He weakened my strength in the way. He shortened my days. I said, "Oh my God, take me not away in the midst of my days. Your years are throughout all generations. Of old have you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They perish, but you shall endure. Yes, all of them shall wax old like a garment, as a vesture. Shall you change them, and they shall be changed. But you are the same, and your years shall have no end. The children of your servant shall continue, and their seed shall be established before you." Verse 27 again. "But you are the same, and your years shall have no end." I encourage you this morning that today we are looking at the attribute of God, in the fact that God is immutable. His years have no end, and he will remain the same. It is said of Jesus Christ, God himself in the flesh, that Jesus Christ, Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We have a firm and true hope, everyone, that God, eternal, will always be the same. He will never change. Now, the word immutable is a bit of a tricky word, and so I want to talk to you about the word immutable. When we say that something is mutating, what are we saying about it? It's changing, isn't it? Mutations, or to be mutating, is to be changing, or morphing is another similar Latin phrase. And so what we have here is the word im, or in, and in this case it's im means not. So in Latin, im is not, mute is change, which means in God there is no change. So immutability is no changing. So when we say immutability, we say no changing. Now, we have the definition of the immutability of God right here before us, and I want to read it out to you. And if you're taking notes, you're going to have a little time to write some of this in, and we're going to be talking about setting it up this first week about God's immutability, linked to why this is so important to know, and this is critical to know. This is foundational to our faith. God is not subject nor capable of change. So God can't even change even if he wanted to. He is who he is. He is unable to change through time or circumstance. Like us, circumstances change us. They change our opinions, they change our view. Yet he is invariably and eternally fixed in his nature and character. God is absolutely without change in God's essence, attributes, consciousness, and will. He is unchangeable. A.W. Tozer gives this interesting response to God's immutability. He says this: God's immutability only appears as great and as wondrous as it is in most perfect beauty when it is viewed against the mutability of man. Friends, can I tell you, I'm mutable. I am changeable. I can't help but change. And we see the beauty of God's immutability against the backdrop of man's mutability, which is why the gospel always, the diamond of the gospel always looks so good against the backdrop of what? The blackness of how fallen we are. Friends, if we don't know how black we are, how sinful and fallen we are left to ourselves, if you haven't discovered that, it's why we need the gospel. We need the good news. All right? And of course, in this sense, we realise that we are so prone to change. We can't help but change. We vacillate to and fro, up and down, all over the place. But we have a God who is an anchor to our soul. He remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. Which is why we can have confidence in that He will be faithful. When you've got friends that have been faithless, when they told you they've been faithful, get where I'm going? So this beautiful sense and sound principle from the Scriptures that God is immutable must grip us. But firstly, before we build on that, let's have a look at how mutable we are. God is not possible. It is not possible in God for there to be a change, but in men, change is impossible to escape. We see this. Anyone looked in the mirror lately? Your face is changing. You're aging. All right? Or you could be getting better looking. All right? Who knows? You know how much kind of work yourself over there. Age, life, circumstance. Guys, every day is different. We live in a constant state of flux. We live in an unfixed world, and we have ultimately very little control over that change. The Bible talks about this as well. In Jude 13, it says that we are wandering stars. We really struggle to keep a fixed point. I mean, God sets the stars, doesn't He? But, man, we really struggle to keep that focus. And certainly as wandering stars, we are out of our proper orbit as fallen man. It says of the wicked that they are like the troubled sea, and they cannot rest. Isaiah 57:20, if you're taking notes. Fallen man is quite simply inconstant. The words of Jacob concerning Reuben in Genesis 49:4 say that Reuben was unstable as water, referring to his character. I just can't rely on him. What does it say about man who cannot make up his mind in the book of James? Like waves tossed to the sea. We're double-minded. We're going to be unstable in all that we do. You know, Isaiah 2:22 says this, that in all of our dealings with man, we must cease from him in trusting him. It actually says in Isaiah 2:22 that we must cease from man. We must stop looking to man. We must, instead of God, we must stop trusting in man, because bottom line, guess who's always going to let us down, everyone? Our friends, maybe even your family. We can only put our hope in one sure and faithful and immutable God. Yeah. All right? Steve, you've been on this journey. You put your faith in a doctor, or you put your faith in the system, or you put your faith in all of these things, and friends, they will let you down. But no matter what your circumstance, our faith must be in the one and true, and guys, the key word, immutable, unchangeable God. We can depend on Him. Is anyone getting where I'm going this morning? Okay, now I'm building this because I only get, in my whole teaching vocation as a minister, one chance to get this into you. So I'm going to take my time with it, and I'm going to really make sure I get in there, because we've got a lot more to cover over my time with you as a pastor, and I only get one chance at this one. All right, so we're going to give it a good shot. No human being is to be depended on. So we don't put our trust in princes. Psalm 146 verse 3. Do not put your trust in princes, in mortal men who cannot save. So we've been commanded not to do that. Man is simply and continues to remain changing. In some ways, we actually like that notion, because if we remain unchanged, it's a bit of a negative concept, isn't it? If we're married to somebody, my wife expects me to change. Why do you think she expects me to change? She wants me to change for that. the better. She wants me to improve. As I grow in the grace and the knowledge of God, as I grow in my understanding of what it is to be a husband and a father, I should improve and change in that sense from a finite, man-centered perspective is good. We are subject to constant change, but we've got to watch this because our change in man is not to be depended on. Remember, the people who one day said, Hosanna to the Son of David, were the next day saying, crucify him, crucify him. So we need to watch the fact here that change can both be positive and negative. Now, the Bible talks about expressions of being changed, and it makes us clear that change is necessary for us in the Bible. And it actually mandates change. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians, we are to go on being changed. Metamorphosis, being changed from glory to glory, from faith to faith. We are being changed more into the image of Jesus Christ. And so it is important to actually remember that change in that sense is good, and we are letting go of our old selves and we are putting on our new creation. Man is to always be aware that we're changing in that sense, Christian sense that is. We live in a world where change is certain and consistent, and this is why we can only take true heart in relying on a God who's unchangeable and immutable in all that he does. Now, there's an author, I want to just quickly read over these points, so stay with me on this. Thomas Watson is his name, and he has written on this topic of God's immutability, and he says, even the greatest things in the world that we look to have changed. He says the greatest kingdoms in the world have changed. All created things are full, he says, of vicissitudes, which has changed. Princes and emperors are subject to change. He notes the Egyptian prince who was the one of the greatest conquering Egyptian princes in all of Egyptian history, Sesostris, who actually took his kings of war and chained them up to his chariot and made them pull his chariot. And he said, what happened to this guy? He's gone, and the kingdom of Egypt has now gone too. Actually, if you look at all the kingdoms in the Bible, the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, friends, they're all gone. All the great kingdoms are gone. And it's actually only really the Jews that have kept their original history in that sense. He goes on and says, even King Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonian kingdom, the crown has had many successes and many kingdoms we have seen eclipsed and convulsed. What has become of the glory of Athens, the pomp of Troy? For when you go there now, he says, only corn grows. That was Troy. All right? Through kingdoms, we see that they have a head of gold, but they have feet of clay. Well, Watson goes on and says, what about the heavens above us? Surely they are some indication of the permanency of the God to whom we serve. And he goes, no, they change. They will perish, but God, you will remain. They will wear out like a garment. Psalm 102, 26, 27. Like clothing, you will change them and they will be discarded. But you remain the same and your years will never end. He says the heavens are the most ancient records where God has written his glory with a sunbeam. Yet these shall change. They will be destroyed as to their substance and their qualities, and they will melt with fervent heat, and they will be refined and purified. Thus the heavens will be changed. But he who dwells in the heavens, I the Lord, do not change. He goes on and talks about the greatest saints that have ever lived. Surely they're great models of stability for us to look to in our faith. And he says, look to the Christian in their spiritual estate. They are full of variation. The seed of grace does not die, yet its beauty and activity withers. Sometimes their faith is at a high tide, other times low tide. Their love flames, and at other times it embers. And some of them lose their first love. David was strong in grace at one time, and he said, God, you are my rock, and in you will I trust. And at other times he says, today I'm going to perish at the hand of Saul. What Christian can say that they do not find a change in their own graces, that the bow of their faith never unbends, and that the strings of their violin never slacken. And then he goes on finally and says, even the mighty angels in heaven with God were subject to change. He says they were created holy, but ultimately were deemed mutable. It's one of the greatest mysteries. How does an angel made holy, living in heaven, become subject to change and fall in sin? And the answer is, only God is incapable of not changing and not being mutable. Jude 6, there's your reference. The angels which did not keep their first estate, these morning stars of heaven, were falling stars. But God's glory, friend, shines with a fixed brightness. In God there is nothing which can change for better or for worse. God cannot change for the better, because then he would now not be perfect. We're saying that he's not perfect if he changes for the better. And he cannot change for the worse, but then he would cease to be perfect. He is immutably holy, immutably good, and there is no shadow of change in him. Numbers 23:19, I want you to turn there. Numbers 23:19, let's have a look at that verse. It's kind of like a launch verse for us, as we look at some classic quotes on God's immutability. Numbers 23:19. We look at the changing nature of man, and then we look at what the writer says in the book of Numbers about how don't look at God like you would look at man who changes. And he says this, God is not a man that he should lie, nor the son of man that he would repent. Some of your versions would say relent there, or change of mind. All right, God's not like that. Has he said it, and shall he not do it? Has he spoken, and shall he not make it good? Friends, you've got good people that you've known over the years. They promise things and they don't fulfill it. They say things and they don't come through on it. They promise, they say, they commit, they speak things, and they cannot make good on their promise. But friends, God is not like that. He makes good on every promise in Jesus' name. So let's have a look here at the definitions, or some quotes, should I say, on the immutability of God. Let's have a look at A.W. Pink. And if you've got worksheets here, guys, you can be writing this in. God is perpetually the same. A.W. Pink says, subject to no change in his being, attributes or determinations. God cannot change for the better, for he is perfect. And being perfect, he cannot change for the worse. Os Guinness says this, the immutability of God's holy character is itself the absolute and the final chord of morality. The fact that God is unchanging shows us his character, his morals, his standards. We know the fixed standard of moral character to live by. We're made in his image and likeness, and Oz gives us that standard of immutability linked to morality and holy character. C.H. Spurgeon says, standing as it were, speaking of God's immutable love. All right? Remember, all of God's attributes are immutable. Spurgeon says this, standing as it were at the world's end, and at the grave's mouth and at hell's door, the cross of Jesus reveals God's unchanging love to the utmost end. Friends, aren't you glad that God, after your bad behaviour, doesn't change his mind about you? He doesn't say, oh, gee, Wayne, a bit disappointed in your behaviour this week. I'm going to take you off the elect list and put you on the reprobate list. I think that'd be pretty disappointing. Anyone ever worked for a boss that always changed their mind? You know how frustrating that is? Friends, we serve a God who will not change his mind. Subsequent to your friends who tell you that God says one thing to them one week and then a different thing to them next week, that is not God telling them that, because God doesn't change his mind. And neither is God out of his mind. If you think that friend is a representative of who God is, you're wrong. He or she isn't. God doesn't change his mind. And this is one of the great truths that not only the great theologians, but the great reformers, the great men and women of God throughout the ages have bolstered their faith on the rock of God's unchangeable immutability. And you can't let go of the fact that God, no matter what I go through in my life, you are still faithful. You are still keeping your promises. You are still glorious. You are still all, knowing, all wise, and I trust what you're doing in my life. Friends, what do you think Job had to do when he lost his family and they were killed? Okay? When he nearly lost his marbles, he had to sit down and anchor himself on the fact that God was still who he said he was. Well, A.W. Tozer says the law of mutation belongs to a fallen world, but God is immutable, and in him men of faith find eternal permanence. Let's just remember, friends, that God's immutability is stamped across every one of his attributes. Every one of his attributes, his love, his kindness, his wisdom, his mercy, his wrath, are all immutable. Stamp immutable on all of them. They are all remain unchanging. God is not moved in any of them. Arthur Pink says that God's attributes in Latin are semper idem. They are always the same. And that is written across every one of them. His power is unabated, his wisdom undiminished, his holiness unsullied. The attributes of God can no more change than him cease to be God. His veracity, which is the Greek word veritas is the word for truth, or the Latin word, sorry. So his veracity is immutable, for his word is forever settled in heaven. Psalm 119:89, his love is eternal. I have loved you with an everlasting love. And having loved his own that were in the world, he loved them to the end. These are all references to God's unchanging commitment. Friends, what God begun in you, he will carry through to completion. Only an immutable God can do that. Anyone else that's subject to change cannot, in all integrity and honesty, promise that. But God's promises are true. Next week we'll look at the fact that God not only promises it, he swears on his own nature that he will do it. And his own nature is immutable. His own name, his own nature. Remember, God's character and nature are represented in the fact of his name. I am that I am. Not I will be what I will be, which implies God's improving. Not this erroneous thinking that God learns from us. Or I was able to instruct God in my prayers. How foolish. You were able to instruct an all-knowing God. You were able to tell God what to do because he wasn't all-knowing already. Guys, this is craziness. Yet, without being grounded in those attributes, we can start thinking like that. And his mercy ceases not. It is everlasting. Friends, his mercy is new every morning. Hey, that every morning is a promise. I don't know about you, but I claim that every morning. So let's remember, all God's attributes or perfections are included in his immutability. There can be no increase or decrease in their number, capacity, or power. God could not be more or less holy, more or less righteous, more or less omnipotent. Immutability, however, is not immobility. God's immutability, the fact that he does not change, does not mean that he can no longer do anything. He's immobile. Now, God can still do stuff, and he can still do things about it. Master theologian Augustus H. Strong rightly says that to suppose that God has a multitude of plans and that he changes his plan with the exigencies of the situation is to make him infinitely dependent upon the varying will of his creatures. What he's trying to say there in English is this: that if you think God is learning as everything evolves and growing and based on what we think and how we feel and how we respond, and God did this because they did that, and in the Bible because of this and that. That's not how God works. It's how the Bible can read, because the Bible's written in metaphorical language. It's written in anthropomorphical language, and I'll talk about that a little bit more next week. And basically saying, if we think God's manipulated by the will and the circumstances of what happens here on earth through the will of his creatures, we deny him one necessary element of perfection, his immutability. We're inferring that because of what happens on earth, God changes his mind in heaven. When the Bible says, let your will be done on earth as it already is in heaven. Friends, Isaiah 40, God has decreed the beginning from the end. God knows it all. We're in time, he's out of time. He sees everything. He sees eternity like I see my wife right here in front of me. It's all clear to him. Everything is open and laid bare before him. Not just people's heart at that point in time. He knows the fluctuations of your heart between now and the time you see him in glory. He knows the days that you will live. Friends, God is not mocked. He's not a man that he should lie. And the worst thing we could do is start thinking like God thinks like us. You're wrong. God is unchangeably immutable. The Old Testament talks about it. Now, I want you to write these down if you're taking notes. These are great verses to lean on as we come towards a close this morning. Numbers 23:19. God is not a man that he should lie. We've looked at that when the Son of Man that he should repent. Next week I'm going to look at the Bible where it says God changed his mind. God regretted that he made man. Like God was upset that all this had worked out the way it was. And I want to talk about how that works in the Bible. And it shows that God's still not immutable, but how that works and plays out in the Scriptures. So it's going to be a real interesting one next week. 1 Samuel 15:29. He who is the glory of Israel, it's the name for God, does not lie or change his mind. He is not a human being that he should change his mind. Psalm 102:26 and 27. They will perish, but you remain. You remain the same. Isaiah 46:10 and 11. I have made known the beginning from the end, from ancient times. Everything which is still to come, I know it. And Malachi 3:6. This is the last chapter in the Old Testament. I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore, the descendants of Jacob will not perish. That's the last chapter in the Old Testament. And it's a reminder that in the Old Testament, God would continue to remain the same and not change into the New Testament. The God that is represented in and through Jesus Christ is the same God of the Old Testament. This whole notion of, the Old Testament's all gone now and the New Testament's in. Guys, that's erroneous thinking. All right, and in the New Testament, we see this. That 2 Timothy 2:11 and 13. If we are faithless, he remains faithful. Hebrews 6:18. It is impossible for God to lie because he has sworn on his own immutable character, and in this we must be greatly encouraged. James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift comes down from above, from the Father of heavenly lights, who in there is no change or even shadow of turning. That word shadow of turning means that when you're coming around a corner and you see a shadow, you know there's a person about to come around the corner, but you just haven't seen them yet. Well, there's not even a shadow of turning in God. We don't even see a shadow, a hint that he might even come around the corner, let alone that he would do that. It's just not going to happen. Hebrews 1:10 through 12. They will perish, speaking of the heavens and the earth, but you will remain the same. And Titus 1, verses 1 and 2. God, you do not lie, and you will bring to pass what you have promised before the beginning of time. So how does all this immutability of God help us? Well, it helps us in this way. The immutability of God gives us comfort and security in who we are and in who God is. Knowing God does not change or provide us with a spiritual and moral... knowing God does provide us with a spiritual and moral anchor in a rapidly changing culture. When we are pulled in many different directions and searching for answers, we can know that God is constant, dependent, and faithful. And finally, we see that God is seen and written in the Scriptures as a rock. You ever read in the Bible where God is a rock? All right, you want to know what that's referring to? It's referring to God's stability, His unchangeability, and His immutability. Can anyone have a guess at what that rock is? Anyone want to have a go at that? That is a rock. Yes, it's a rock. Very good. Jahan, what is it? It's the rock of Gibraltar. Okay? And why would a rock be used, or why would a geographical land structure be used for companies in advertising like Prudential Insurance Company, for savings and loans, for even drum hardware? You know, the stands that hold up cymbals and drums. Right? Why would companies draw on this analogy? A rock. It's stable. Guys, you can trust us. We're going to be there in a few years' time. When you look at that rock ain't going anywhere. All right? It's in the ground. It's stable. It's secure. It's immovable. And one would say it's immutable. It's unchangeable. Although the weather might wear on it a bit, trees might come and go depending on the season, and vegetation and so forth, that rock ain't going anywhere. Now, some facts on the Rock of Gibraltar, and then we're going to wind up to a close. The Rock of Gibraltar is 1,400 roughly feet high, and was one of the pillars of Hercules. It was known to the Romans in the ancient world as one of the 2 points that marked the limits to the known world. All right, when you sail past the Rock of Gibraltar, or the Pillar of Hercules as it was known back then, you could drop off the edge of the world. All right? That's what they thought. Come what may, that rock ultimately does not change, and after centuries of hot summers, freezing winters and severe storms, guess what? You can still go to Gibraltar and you're going to get sold all sorts of sightseeing things, and you can actually go and stand right on the edge there and literally stand and look out over the edge. For some of you people that don't like heights, I would strongly not recommend that. Well, why do companies use this rock? Why does the Bible use this rock? Well, in a similar way, the unchanging and immutability of God is declared in the Scriptures as God being our rock. Psalm 18, 1b and 2. I love you, O Lord, my strength. Just listen to this as we close in prayer. The Lord is my rock and my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. Moses says that the Israelites deserted the rock who fathered them, and they forgot the God who gave birth to them. Psalm 18:31, for who is God besides the Lord, and who is the rock except our God? Psalm 18:46, the Lord lives, praise be to my rock. Psalm 19:14, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Psalm 2:2, there is none holy like the Lord, there is none besides you, there is no rock like our God. And Matthew 16:18, Jesus looks at his disciples and says, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. Friends, we are living, building and abiding on the rock that is higher than ourselves. We don't look to people, we don't look to ourselves, we look to an unchanging, unceasing, all faithful, all knowing, all glorifying God in Jesus' name. Well, on this note, we realise that Jesus is the same yesterday, today and forever. R.C. Sproul says that the immutability of God is the rock of our souls and the anchor of our faith. You know, can you give me 2 more minutes? 2 more minutes and turn with me. Just want to turn to one more scripture. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9. Paul's writing and he says, "Be diligent to come shortly to me. Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and has departed to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia. Titus has gone to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Take Mark and bring him with you, for he is profitable to me for the ministry. And Tychicus I have sent to Ephesus. The cloak that I have left at Troas with Carpus, when you come, bring with you, and the books, but especially the parchments. Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. The Lord reward him according to his works. Of whom be aware also, for he has greatly withstood our words. And at my first answer, no man stood with me. All men forsook me." Can you see this? Demas has forsaken him. Crescens has gone. All men have ultimately let Paul down. And I pray, God, that it may not be laid to their charge. He's praying for them. "Notwithstanding, friends, the Lord stood with me." Who's faithful, everyone? Who's unchangeable in their commitment to us? Who will never let us down? He holds on to the faithfulness and the immutability of God Almighty. Let's pray.